Oh, hey everybody, it's Max. I'm here today. We're going to talk about Goldwing steering bearing torque on the 2001 to 2017 Honda Goldwing. There's volumes and ad nauseum on the internet about a deceleration wobble on this model of motorcycle. So for the people who like to operate their motorcycle with no hands on it and then wonder why it might wobble while it's under a deceleration load, there are ways to work around trying to cure that. But one of the root causes is in the steering head. So when you're changing the bearings, pretty much nobody would ever put the stock ball bearing back into this model of motorcycle. So pretty much everybody uses a tapered roller bearing. Very popular brand is a company called All Balls. They've been installed in 1 million Goldwings at this point, probably. Without showing you the process of changing steering bearings, that is complex, and it actually exceeds the scope of what I would call a normal do-it-yourselfer. And one of the reasons for that is to do it properly takes a special tool to draw the bearing races in square to the frame so you don't mess the frame up. Now, people have been driving steering bearings in with drifts and little hand disc-shaped things that kind of match the inner race of the bearing for years. But on aluminum frame bikes, when you walk the race down into the frame, you invariably scrape aluminum shavings with it. You're wasting your time. This is something that should be done by a professional. And before you let the professional do it, whoever you consider to be professional, you should ask them to see their bearing press. And if they don't have one, find another shop. Where's ours at? So this setup's like $400. You know, most people aren't going to buy this to do a steering head bearing one time because it only costs, a couple $100 to have the bearings changed by a professional. So this set of tools lets us hold the tool very square to the frame and pull the bearing race into the headset. And so if they're going to show you something they hit by hand with a hammer, that's not going to be the shop you want doing your steering head bearings. So, and if they try and tell you, I don't know, I've been doing it that way for 25 years, they've been doing it wrong that way for 25 years. So don't just keep moving on down the road. Got to have an actual bearing race press. So we're going to assume that we've got our bearings installed properly. And the critical thing I wanted to talk about is the torquing and how the parts are arranged, because this is the greatest source of where even a good installation goes wrong. Now, for purposes of display here, this is a 2001 to 2017 Goldwing steering head. Underneath your top crown and the top crown nut is a pair of nuts. One sits directly on the top bearing and has a shield around it. I just don't have one loose to use. In between that is this locking tab, and then there's a second nut, and then the top triple crown sits on top of that, and then your crown nut goes on top of that. Now, as they say, the devil is in the details. This is the devil. This little seemingly simple lock tab. What doesn't meet the eye is that this thing is actually conically shaped in nature. Now this one is smashed flat. I'm going to show you a brand new one. If you can see, it's shaped conically, okay? The whole part is. So it's actually a spring washer. So after it's been used, it usually doesn't work as well. So if I was going to do steering head bearings, I'd recommend you order one of these from the Honda dealer and have it on hand before you do the job. Now, so having said that, the way this is torqued, first, the main nut on top of the bearing, you're going to have a special socket that you can find on the internet, and you need a digital torque wrench. Now there are For sure, this job is not possible to do with your grandfather's needle style, needle gauge torque wrench. A lot of people will have a clicker style torque wrench that were used for a big period in between there. Good, but not really good enough because most of them aren't calibrated or haven't been checked or recalibrated. And 1 or 2 pounds of error on the bearing torque can make this bike either still wobble or make it steer too tightly and hunt down the road. So modern digital torque wrench will self-zero. You can buy them relatively affordably. If you're going to be working on your Goldwing yourself, it's a worthwhile investment, particularly if you're not a professional mechanic and aren't used to torquing bolts and know the feel and sensation of that. So digital torque wrench, we recommend 21 foot-pounds on a tapered roller bearings. We've been all over the place and tried it, anywhere from 21 to 23 and higher. The bike will definitely start hunting as it goes down the road. By 25, guaranteed 100%, the bike will not self-center and naturally find its center. Anything below 20, the bike will still wobble. So, very sensitive. So 21 is kind of that sweet spot in there. So you're going to torque that first nut to 21 foot-pounds. Recommending the new conical washer. It goes on with the tabs that are all the way bent down. They go down first, all right? Then goes your second nut. This nut, you're gonna take your socket, you're just gonna tighten the second nut by hand as tightly as you can get it. And when I say tightly, I mean like finger tightly. You're not trying to go, tighten it. Your goal is to finger tighten it. As soon as it zeros, you'll actually can feel the cone squish. When it zeros, you're going to back that washer up until the tab lines up and you can bend the tab up on each side into a locking groove, okay? So that's the ticket. Just take the socket in your hand, tighten it, back it up, bend the tabs up. That's done. Then the crown goes on. Now, why is that? It makes no sense that there's 2 nuts in there that actually aren't. Now, what the washer's doing is it's not letting the nuts touch. They're not touching. Now, so that sounds really weird. Why aren't the 2 nuts tightened against each other? So the reason is when you go to put your crown on and you put the top nut, this nut's torqued to 75 or I think 76 foot-pounds of torque, which is a significant amount of torque. If these 2 nuts were contacting each other, were touching, actually, seated against each other and tightened down against each other, when you put that amount of torque on this top crown nut, as it pulls the steering stem up through the upper crown, it will actually pull on the threads, on a very tiny level. But as it pulls on the threads, it will add additional torque into the steering bearings and over tighten the bearing, and then you'll be back to a bike that hunts as it goes down the road and won't center up and just go straight. So there actually has to be a little tiny gap, which is dictated by this conical washer, conical lock tab. And so that's the trick. This is where steering head torquing goes wrong, all right? So try and get a new wave washer, a new cone washer, lock tab, anytime you're gonna do this job. And the other thing, before you tighten this top crown, I recommend you slide both forks back in and snug the pinch bolts. You don't have to set the heights just right or anything. That's to make sure that the triple clamps are perfectly aligned and squared with each other, so they're not cocked in any way when you go to torque this down. And another handy tip the mechanics use. Use the steering stops. It's okay. They're very helpful. So when you go to torque, wheel will be turned to the right. When you're going to break nuts loose, turn it to the left, and you can use the steering stop that way to break loose. So there's the tip of the day to help make sure that you get the torque and correct on the bearings on your 2001 to 2017 Honda Goldwing. I'm Max. Thanks for watching my videos. Don't forget to share, and please subscribe to my channel. We'll be back with more entertaining and educational content soon.